Hi, Design Miami. I'm Hassan Pierre, the co-founder and CEO of sustainable retailer Maison De Mode, and I'm so excited to speak with these two amazing leaders in sustainable design today, who are constantly championing ethical solutions in the world of design. Berbee, the Master of Sustainable Packaging, and Burak Cakmak, Dean of Fashion at Parsons School of Design, to explore ethical design and the role of designers in shaping the path towards a more equitable planet. Thank you both for joining me here today. And without further ado, let's get into it. So, Jan, I want to start off with you and asking you a question. I know you designed these amazing packaging for these fantastic almond candles that are being displayed at Design Miami. So, if you could just tell me, how can social responsibility around consumer goods be expanded beyond the luxury realm? How can it be normalized and just basically put everywhere and anywhere?
Yeah, that's a good question indeed. And it's a question that I am happy to answer, but at the same time, it's a question that can have many different answers. So it would probably, one of the social elements in this question would be to have many people answer it and try to mix all the answers together. But my take on that is that social responsibility is something also about the way we treat the earth we all live in. And it's often said that we don't really have inherited the earth from our parents, but basically what we do is we borrow it from our children. So the more careful we treat the earth, the more social responsibly we act towards this earth and towards our kids. And in my, let's say, in my business, which is packaging, most people agree that packaging is something that sooner or later ends up in the garbage can, garbage bin, which means that useful resources are well put to waste, where maybe there's something much better to do. So, for example, with the candle packaging we've made with almond, a packaging that is sustainable, compostable, it can be given back to the earth where it will become new nutrition, and that is for me one of the ways to, let's say, include both social responsible behavior with sustainable behavior.
That's so great. And you know, Almond's mission, it's important to say, is that it is about sharing that biodegradable packaging. And I think that's a great way, you know, for it to start expanding into other realms, looking at it from a candle design perspective, which is quite interesting. So oftentimes brands take an incremental approach to sustainability by slowly implementing practices. What are some of those touch points when it comes to sustainable design that you look at or that we should be prioritizing?
Well, obviously, I can answer that question with the word packaging, because that's an important element, but I would rather choose an approach where I would say an incremental approach is good, but first and foremost, I would say that the biggest and the most important thing for any brand to look at is that red dot on the horizon where you want to be, and from that target, from that objective, you could let's say schedule your incremental approach, your path towards that level of sustainability. And guess what? During the journey, you will learn, because sustainability, as important as it is still something most of us don't really understand. There's so many complexities in being sustainable, and from that angle, taking this incremental approach is the best way to go forward. But as said, as long as you have that long-term vision clear for your team and your company.
That's such a great point there, and I think it'd be interesting also for everybody to know, since Almond is such a collective of artists, you know, the candle brand that's really come together to show that, you know, a world without plastic is really possible. How did your collaboration with the brand come about? Like, how did you guys get together and decide to do this amazing packaging?
Yeah. So, well, actually. Amen, Rodrigo, and myself of Grown.Bio, we started our discussion already, I think, a year ago, where we both noticed that we had something that has a special story. the almond candle is bringing light into people's lives. And the mycelium packaging, besides the peculiar story of a fungus that makes a packaging, which many people find a little bit odd and maybe sometimes even scary, has a good story because it replaces oil-based plastics. So we decided that together we could really bring a beautiful and natural and sustainable product over to people who love this in a beautiful and sustainable packaging. So that was the start of it. We had this end goal in mind. The complex part was when we started to find a way how to pack that candle, because there's so many ways. And we tried to design something that even at the end of its life as a packaging could still be something useful. And what we created is something that could serve as a pot or a planter pot or even a coaster in its later life after it has done its packaging job. And then at the very end of it, you could still give it back to your garden, to your plants, or just in the soil, wherever you are.
Well, you guys have done such an amazing job. The design is incredible, and obviously the circularity of the whole process behind it is something that many people should try and replicate in their products, I think. I want to switch over now to Burak and ask you a couple of really interesting questions, because you also are a fan of the Almond Candles brand, and you also have a major voice when it comes to teaching the next generation about sustainability when it comes into the fashion design space. So I want to ask you, a major point of sustainable fashion is to move away from seasonal, strong personality pieces and more into timeless versatility. Do you think this has an impact on limiting the creativity of today's designers?
Well, in a way, all of the negative impact that we're seeing that's happening in the fashion industry is actually pushing in that positive direction the way you're defining. What has amazed me is that we achieved a kind of a tipping point where there's basically, it's a seasonless moment because there are so many products that are introduced every day that we basically blow out the idea of having a regular season for discovering new products. Hence, as customers, we are already overwhelmed with the amount of things that we are seeing, and it's pushing everybody in the other direction, especially Generation Z and Generation Y, to think about, I have already so many things and what I do about it. So it doesn't mean that this is a limitation of creativity. It's recognizing where we have come in the world, both as creatives as well as customers, and also using that moment to seek a different way of living and different way of satisfying our needs when it comes to fashion. With so many products in hand, it naturally led to a lot of interest around sharing and pushing for new business models, but also really pushing the idea around styling and looking at upcycling and recycling, reusing all of these materials. Plus, we're seeing a lot of innovation in the industry, even on the technological level, pushing not only new materials that are like novel fibers that are lab grown and more sustainable, but also even the full recycling of things like polyester is already fully available. And then we are seeing even the naturals going in this direction. Hence, we are basically going through this incredible change in the fashion industry at this moment, where creativity is not limited, it's just at a different phase. Suddenly we recognize that being creative doesn't mean about developing 4 collections or 6 collections a year. I don't think any creative wants to create 52 collections a year. So as a result, we are now deciding, I'm just going to do what I want to do when I want to do it. There's enough products. So it's about finding what's appropriate to your values, your lifestyle, creating your space. And through digital connectivity, we are also finding our communities and audiences. Hence, we are able to create our own pace, own rhythm, own communities, own locations, and really push creativity in a whole nother direction. So I find it quite exciting, actually, where we are at the moment.
That is really exciting. And I love the way that you put it, that we're all sort of finding and being able to create our own, almost our own mini industry, our own communities, our own timeline and time frame. And I guess that is the future of where this industry is going to expand to, which is really interesting. Another question I really am interested to know, and I think a lot of people want to hear, is that, the fashion industry has historically been about competitiveness. And when it comes to sustainable design, there's a lot of sharing that is involved in data and resources and so much information. Do you think a more collaboration between creatives is the future when it comes to fashion? Do you see more of this? You even see it on a high-end level with a Mucha and a Raf Simons, but do you think most new designers or new people wanting to enter this phase will look at collaboration as sort of the key to being successful?
Yeah, I mean, I guess some of the high-profile partnerships you've seen is a reflection of what was already happening in the creative sector. It has been bubbling up, and if you are a designer, if you are part of a creative education system, you already know that both the curriculum has evolved, but also the way the designers engaging has evolved, even at the smallest scale. And we've seen basically team approach to everything that has been created, including all of the academic approaches in the classroom, is now requiring teamwork as part of the learning to be able to succeed as a designer into the future. We have already recognized that the moment of 90s is gone, where you have the star creative director that's leading everything. And the truth is, designers are not just competing with designers, they're also competing with artificial intelligence and technology at the moment, which means that designers has to become problem solvers and collaborators to be able to stay relevant. Hence, we are seeing a very different kind of engagement that's happening. At the most visible level, you have given the example of Raf and Mucha, but clearly we have already seen in the past maybe 4 to 6 seasons, incredible collaborations between so many unknown designers that are just graduating with very big brands, especially when it comes to streetwear. And that is showing the need for newness and interest in being able to have a much more open source way of thinking about design, and then bringing in different voices in and opening the technologies and tools to everybody to co-create and sell and also share the revenue out of it. It's a much more interesting way of working, and it will also allow us to exponentially grow, because we will be creating this very active ecosystem where people are engaging with each other in many different directions, and a lot of unknown results will come out of it. One of the interesting things that I find is fashion industry is now it's not just about fashion anymore. It's not about the retailer. It's not about just putting a collection in the store. It's about lifestyle, and truly about lifestyle. In the past, brands called themselves lifestyle brands, but they haven't really lived up to it. Today, it's naturally happening, and we are seeing fashion influence everything from entertainment to technology to many different areas, including things like gaming, for example. There's a lot of unexpected levels of engagement happening between the fashion players, traditional fashion players, with these other industries to come up with solutions that excites people. But ultimately, all of this goes back to one thing: because we are all connected and we are also seeing what's happening around the world instantaneously, we are all seeking as individuals multi-sensory experiences. And the way to do that, it's not just fashion, it's not just interior design, it's not just architecture, it's not just music or performance, it's combining all of these things together. Because we are already educated about each individual sectors, and we are expected to be wowed by all of these different players. And the only way to do that is bring everything together, open it up in an open source way, so that unexpected outcomes can come out of it.
I love that. And, I asked that question because it really ties back to, what Jan and Almond Candles have done with, the packaging and trying to, succeeding on collaborating on that from an environmental, but also a design perspective, which I think so many brands are leaning towards and trying to do. One last question that I want to ask the both of you is that, we look at circular design as a way to eliminate waste, which I think we can all agree is probably one of the most detrimental parts of our industry, waste in so many ways. do you think that the consumer is trained or even willing to slow down as a way to sort of lessen that waste? Do you think the consumer has a role now and a responsibility in this whole supply chain of waste that we're all creating? I don't know which one of you guys want to take the start on that, but I'd love to hear both your perspectives.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in. I think what matters is the emotional triggers we're setting, right? Because brands and designers have always used communication marketing as a way of excite individuals to engage with fashion and buy fashion products, because we know that fashion is not about need, it's about want. And otherwise it's pure clothing. And in some ways we are trying to satisfy those basic human needs around that newness and excitement without necessarily having a negative impact on the environment. So there's a way to do that by triggering the right emotions. And it's about focusing on the emotion that's creating rather than creating new products. That's going to drive that change in my mind. Because if the industry doesn't change, it's so hard to expect and give the responsibility only to the customer to assume that they're willing to buy less because they feel guilty about it. I think there's an expectation that the brands has to have the responsibility to understand the overall impact and approach it in a different way and push for new models and excite the customers and also get them engaged in it. Hence, we are seeing the impacts of sharing economy. Circularity is absolutely one of those, but in the broader sense, that ties back to the sharing economy and circulating products for longer, finding new uses for it. And we are not talking about it as a sustainability solution. We are talking about as the future business solution. Because ultimately, you cannot also exponentially grow the amount of product you sell to relatively limited number of people in the world. It's the number of product growth is much bigger than number of population growth. So at some point, we need to recognize that there's an end to selling more. Hence, the brands who wants to survive has to make this a core business proposition to be able to have a new business model to succeed in the industry. And use their creativity and marketing and communication in promoting these new ways as the new exciting ways of engaging with fashion. So it's not directly about the consumer, but I feel like there's a way to get there.
I love that. I love that viewpoint about making it really about a new business model in the future. I think that's a very important, especially for a lot of brands who look at the bottom line. Jan, do you care to touch and answer upon that question as well?
Yes, certainly. And I was actually triggered by what Burak just said is about lifestyle. And I think that what we see now is that more and more people are adopting a social and sustainable lifestyle, which is great. But at the same time, it also bears the risk of being a temporary style that may be followed by something else. And what I feel in, let's say, moving towards more circular way of living is that people, including myself, need to really start some, what I would call deep thinking, concentrating on what matters to you really, what do you essentially want. And it's often said that the possession of something you would like to buy, the possession of that object is often the end of the fun. So actually the question then is, what did it really do for me? Why did I actually want it? So that deep thinking that I think we all need to move towards requires what really drives you. And in return, that will also trigger completely new business models that you already discussed about. Because companies, service providers will have to come up with completely new sets of services to answer the real needs that lie below that maybe more superficial need of owning or having an object. So I feel that currently we are on the verge of some real big changes, both in the way people act as individuals, as we act as a society, and the way businesses handle and act towards their stakeholders.
Yeah. So maybe it's about the thrill of the journey rather than the end result.
And I agree with you, Burak. It is a great thrill, and it's a big thrill as well.
Well, I want to thank you guys so much for joining me here today. Both of your insights were very interesting and quite exciting. I think the takeaway for this is that collaboration is key, and that let's share as much information as we can. And I think it's also so interesting that we have started this discussion through the idea of a collaboration between a candle company and a packaging expert, which is really so interesting that such a niche idea could eventually become such a mass idea. And I think that's something that we're all sort of looking forward to. So again, thank you both for joining me here today, and thank you all at Design Miami. We hope you enjoyed this talk.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Bye-bye.